Welcome back to FUSTY Stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. The rain fell softly over Primrose Hill as Zara Miller clutched her worn handbag and stared at the tall, iron-gated mansion that seemed to breathe silence. The Washington estate looked like something out of a royal photograph. Stone walls, marble stairs, glass windows that reflected London's gray sky. Yet beneath the beauty was the unmistakable heaviness of loneliness. Zara's agency had warned her, Mrs. Eleanor Washington isn't easy. She's dismissed every maid within a week. But Zara needed this job desperately. Her mother's medical bills were mounting, and the small flat she shared with her younger brother was collapsing with unpaid rent. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the bell. A tall butler in a black coat opened the door, eyeing her modest dress. As she stepped inside, she could feel the chill of money and misery mixing in the air. Portraits of a younger Eleanor and her late husband adorned the hallway. Zara whispered a small prayer, half for courage, half for patience, as she followed the butler to the room where her fate waited. Inside, Eleanor Washington sat in her wheelchair by the window, pale sunlight tracing her silver hair. Her eyes, sharp as glass, lifted from a newspaper. "Another one," she muttered. "Let's see how long you last." Zara bowed politely, her heart pounding. But as she looked into the older woman's tired eyes, she didn't see cruelty, only pain, buried under 20 years of bitterness. For a moment, their gazes locked, and something wordless passed between them. Defiance and destiny meeting for the first time. On her second morning, Zara learned the Washington mansion was less a home and more of a museum. Breakfast was served in silence. The housekeeper, Mrs. Turner, communicated through clipped instructions. Marcus Washington, Eleanor's only son, barely appeared, his life consumed by high-rise developments, luxury towers, and board meetings. Zara, however, had her own quiet rhythm. She cleaned meticulously, spoke softly, and never intruded. Still, Eleanor watched her with suspicion. "You don't have to pretend kindness," she said one afternoon. "I've seen too many like you. The pity in your eyes disgusts me." Zara didn't flinch. "I don't pity you, ma'am," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I respect you. There's a difference." That reply surprised Eleanor enough to leave her speechless. In the days that followed, the older woman tested Zara's patience in every way, ringing the bell for impossible tasks, snapping over tea temperatures, and accusing her of rearranging furniture just to irritate her. Yet, Zara never raised her tone. She simply adjusted, smiled faintly, and carried on. Behind her patience was a quiet fire, a young woman who had known humiliation, hunger, and despair yet refused to bow to it again. Unbeknownst to Eleanor, Zara had once trained in basic physiotherapy while caring for her late grandmother. Each time she pushed Eleanor's wheelchair, she noticed subtle stiffness and traces of nerve movement that others had overlooked. She started believing the impossible, that maybe, just maybe, this woman could walk again. Marcus Washington returned home one Friday night, exhausted from a press conference. His sharp navy suit, sleek car, and guarded tone screamed success. But when he saw his mother scolding Zara in the hallway, something flickered, anger mixed with protectiveness. "Mother, please," he sighed. "You can't keep doing this." Eleanor's glare froze him. "You don't tell me how to treat my staff," she snapped. Zara bowed politely, trying to diffuse the tension. But Marcus's eyes lingered, first on her humility, then on the gentleness in her tone. "You're new," he said, his voice softening. "What's your name?" "Zara Miller, sir." He nodded curtly and left, but that brief exchange would change both their lives. Over the next weeks, Marcus observed from a distance. Unlike the others, Zara didn't flinch when Eleanor threw verbal daggers. She didn't gossip or complain. Instead, she hummed quietly while cleaning, her melodies floating to the halls like forgotten hope. One evening, Marcus found her arranging Eleanor's therapy equipment, dust-covered, long abandoned. "Why bother?" he asked. Zara glanced up, her eyes steady. "Because I believe she can still heal." Marcus gave a tired half-smile. "You don't know her." "Maybe," she replied, "but I know pain and how it fears hope." For the first time in years, Marcus couldn't sleep that night. He couldn't stop hearing those words. Zara began introducing small changes to Eleanor's daily routine. At first, it was subtle, slight adjustments to the way she sat, gentle massages to stimulate nerve endings, and morning sunlight sessions near the balcony. Eleanor complained endlessly. This is pointless, she muttered. But Zara's consistency disarmed her anger. Every morning, she appeared with the same soft voice, the same patient smile. Within 2 weeks, Eleanor noticed a faint tingling in her left foot, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. Fear gripped her heart more than hope. "Don't give me false miracles," she whispered. Zara knelt beside her. "It's not false if you believe in yourself again." When Zara informed Marcus about the progress, he refused to believe it. "My mother's legs are dead, Zara. Don't toy with her emotions." "I'm not," she said simply. To prove it, she invited him to watch one of the sessions. Marcus stood silently as Zara guided Eleanor's trembling legs through gentle stretches. Sweat dripped from Eleanor's forehead. "Enough!" she gasped. But then her foot twitched once, twice. Marcus's breath caught. He dropped to one knee beside her. "Mom." Eleanor burst into quiet tears, her pride cracking open. That night, Marcus stood at the balcony, watching Zara walk down the servants' path under the moonlight. For the first time, he realized Hope looked a lot like her. Eleanor's icy shell began to thaw. She started asking Zara about her family, her dreams, and even her favorite songs. The mansion no longer felt suffocating. It breathed again. Zara would open the curtains, letting in morning light, and Eleanor would sit silently, watching the city come alive. Sometimes Marcus joined them before work. Those breakfasts became a ritual, a silent acknowledgement that something sacred was returning to their lives. But the gossip among staff grew louder. "She's just playing therapist to get close to Mr. Marcus," one whispered. Zara ignored them, but the rumors hurt. One afternoon, Eleanor overheard 2 maids mocking Zara's fake kindness. Furious, she dismissed them instantly. When Zara found out, she was stunned. "You defended me?" she asked softly. Eleanor nodded. "You've given me more than any doctor or friend ever has. You made me feel human again." Tears welled in Zara's eyes. For the first time, Eleanor reached for her hand, not as employer and servant, but as 2 women bound by shared pain. Marcus walked in on the moment and froze. The image of his mother smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in 2 decades burned into his soul. That night, he realized he was falling deeply, dangerously in love. Weeks turned into months. Under Zara's careful guidance, Eleanor progressed from minimal movement to brief assisted standing. Each small victory felt monumental. Zara's laughter echoed through the halls. Her joy became contagious. Marcus often found himself drawn to her presence, sometimes lingering in doorways just to listen to her voice. But while admiration bloomed, he feared crossing boundaries. He was a billionaire executive. She was a maid. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. One evening, a thunderstorm cut the power. The mansion plunged into darkness. Zara rushed to check on Eleanor, who trembled with memories of her accident, the car crash that had taken her husband and her ability to walk. Zara sat beside her, holding her hand through the lightning flashes. "You're safe," she whispered. Marcus entered quietly and watched them, 2 women linked by light and courage in the dark. "You have a gift," he told Zara later, "not just for healing, but for seeing people's hearts." She smiled sadly. Maybe because mine's been broken before. Their eyes lingered a little too long. The storm outside passed, but inside the Washington mansion, a new one of emotion and awakening had begun. The next stage of therapy began. Eleanor could now lift herself halfway from the wheelchair, using a metal bar Zara had installed in the room. Each attempt left her trembling, but determined. Marcus often joined in, acting as silent support. "You can do this, Mum," he said one afternoon as Zara guided her steps. Eleanor's knees buckled, and she fell forward, straight into Marcus's arms. Laughter filled the room, followed by tears. It was the first time in 20 years Eleanor had felt herself moving freely, even briefly. Later that evening, Marcus found Zara on the garden terrace, her face glowing in moonlight. "You've changed everything," he said softly. She shook her head. "Your mother did that herself. I just reminded her she could." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the world fell silent. He reached out, brushing a raindrop or maybe a tear from her cheek. "You deserve the world, Zara." She turned away, whispering, "The world doesn't belong to people like me." But Marcus stepped closer. "Then I'll make it ours." Before either could speak again, their lips met, brief, trembling, but full of every unspoken feeling they tried to bury. The following morning, gossip exploded. A chauffeur had seen Marcus and Zara on the terrace. By noon, the mansion buzzed with whispers. Mrs. Turner confronted Zara harshly, accusing her of manipulation. Eleanor overheard everything. When Marcus returned from a meeting, he found Zara packing her bags, tears streaking her face. "You shouldn't have defended me," she said bitterly. "It's only made things worse." Marcus grabbed her hand. "I don't care what they say." But before he could say more, Eleanor entered the room. "Enough," she commanded. Turning to Marcus, she said, "If your feelings are real, prove them. Don't let fear rule you like it ruled me." That night, Eleanor called Zara to her room. "You've done the impossible, my dear. You gave me back hope, and now I must give you back yours." She revealed that her late husband's charity foundation needed new leadership, someone empathetic, visionary, and strong. "I want you to help me rebuild it," she said. Zara hesitated. "I'm just a maid." Eleanor smiled. "You were never just anything." Outside, Marcus listened quietly, realizing his mother had seen what he saw long ago. Zara wasn't their servant. She was their salvation. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. The sky outside was golden, and the city hummed softly in the distance. Zara and Eleanor were alone in the living room for a routine session. "I can't do it today," Eleanor whispered, trembling. "Yes, you can," Zara replied gently. She helped her stand, holding her shoulders firmly. The older woman's knees shook violently, but she didn't stop. "One step," Zara urged. "Just one." Slowly, Eleanor's right foot moved forward, then the left. 2 steps, then 3. Tears blurred her vision as she cried out, "I'm walking." Marcus burst into the room moments later, stunned. His mother stood upright, unaided, tears streaming down her cheeks. He fell to his knees, sobbing, "Mom, you're walking." Eleanor reached out and pulled both her son and Zara into an embrace. "She gave me back my life," she whispered. News of the miracle spread quietly among the staff, who wept with joy. That night, Marcus took Zara's hands and said, "You've done what doctors couldn't. You healed not just her, but us." Zara smiled through tears. Sometimes faith walks before medicine. Their love, once forbidden, now felt like destiny unfolding. Months later, Eleanor was walking independently, her strength returning each day. The Washington mansion transformed, laughter, music, and light filling every corridor. One evening, as twilight settled over London, Marcus invited Zara to a charity gala at the Dorchester. She hesitated and used the glamour, but he insisted. "You belong beside me," he whispered. As the orchestra played softly, he led her to the center of the ballroom. The lights dimmed, and on the screen behind them appeared a video of Eleanor standing unaided, smiling at the camera. This miracle was made possible by faith, love, and one extraordinary woman, Zara Miller. The crowd applauded, but Zara was frozen in disbelief as Marcus knelt before her. "You came into our lives as a maid," he said, voice trembling, "but you became our miracle. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "Yes." The room erupted in applause. Eleanor, watching from her table, pressed her hands together in gratitude. That night, the woman who hadn't walked for 2 decades danced with her son at his engagement, while the young maid who healed her heart stepped into a love story written by faith itself. The wedding day dawned bright and golden, as if even the heavens were rejoicing. The ceremony was held in the lush gardens of the Washington estate, once silent and sorrowful, now blooming with roses and laughter. Zara stood in an elegant ivory gown, her dark curls pinned with pearls, her eyes shimmering with disbelief that this day was real. Across the aisle, Marcus looked at her as if she were the only light in existence. Guests whispered in awe, not just because the billionaire's son was marrying his former maid, but because the bride had performed the unthinkable. She had helped his mother walk again. As Eleanor entered the aisle unaided, the crowd gasped and rose to their feet. She moved slowly but proudly, her every step a declaration that miracles were real. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed Zara softly, his voice trembling as he whispered, "You didn't just heal my mother, Zara, you healed me." Fireworks burst over the London skyline as their first dance began beneath strings of fairy lights. Eleanor, seated nearby with tears of pride, whispered to herself, "My husband would have loved her." That night, as music faded and the guests departed, Zara sat by the window in her wedding dress, realizing that love, real, sacrificial love, had rewritten all their destinies. Their married life began in Marcus's glass-walled penthouse overlooking the Thames. The once sterile home of a lonely billionaire was transformed into a sanctuary of warmth. Zara filled the space with laughter, books, and homemade meals that replaced boardroom silence with joy. Eleanor moved in temporarily during her final stages of therapy, insisting she didn't want to rust in the mansion. She now took morning walks in the courtyard, her cane tapping like a metronome of gratitude. Marcus struggled to adjust at first. His life had always revolved around work and reputation, but Zara's gentleness taught him a new rhythm. He found himself skipping meetings to have breakfast with her, or walking with Eleanor in Hyde Park. The tabloids tried to sensationalize their marriage, from Maid to Mrs. Washington, but Marcus ignored them. "Let them talk," he said one evening, holding Zara's hand on the balcony. "They don't know what it means to be saved by love." Beneath the city lights, they promised each other that their story would not end in luxury. It would continue in legacy. Zara didn't know it yet, but she was already carrying the seed of that promise within her. It was an early morning when Zara woke to the scent of rain and jasmine, feeling strangely lightheaded. Eleanor noticed her pale complexion during breakfast. "You're glowing," she said knowingly. Later that day, the doctor confirmed what Zara had barely dared to hope. She was pregnant. She held the report in trembling hands, tears spilling freely. Marcus, when told, lifted her off her feet, laughing like a child. "A new beginning," he said, voice cracking with joy. "We'll name her Hope if it's a girl." News of the pregnancy spread quickly, capturing the city's imagination. "The miracle woman brings another miracle," headlines declared. Yet Zara stayed humble, focused on her small family. She spent evenings reading aloud to Eleanor, who claimed to feel her late husband's presence each time she heard Zara's voice. As the months passed, Eleanor began painting again, a hobby she had abandoned after her accident. "You've brought color back into everything," she told Zara one afternoon, her brush gliding over a canvas filled with light. For Zara, life had become a sacred rhythm. Love, faith, healing, and now motherhood. She didn't realize that another test, one that would challenge everything they'd built, was waiting just ahead. 6 months into pregnancy, Marcus's company faced a scandal. A rival leaked false documents suggesting financial fraud. Overnight, the family's name was dragged through mud. Reporters camped outside their gate. Investors panicked. Marcus, once confident and composed, grew restless and cold again. "They're trying to destroy us," he muttered, pacing the floor. Zara tried to comfort him, but he snapped under the pressure. "You wouldn't understand." The words cut deep. She retreated into silence, tears streaming down her face as Eleanor intervened. "Don't lose what she gave you," she warned her son. "You once lived in darkness. She pulled you out." Days later, Marcus realized the truth of his mother's words. He found Zara praying quietly in the nursery, hands over her belly, whispering, "God, protect our child." Shame flooded him. He knelt beside her, his head in her lap. "I am sorry. Zara, I forgot what matters." She touched his hair gently. "Then remember now, we survived worse." Together, they rebuilt trust, blocking out the noise of the world. The accusation soon unraveled as false, clearing Marcus's name. The experience left him shaken but stronger, proof that faith, like healing, often demanded walking through fire before finding peace again. A year after their wedding, Zara went into labor on a snowy December night. Marcus rushed her to St. Mary's Hospital, his hands trembling as she squeezed them through the contractions. Eleanor waited outside the delivery room, clutching her rosary. Hours later, a newborn cry filled the corridor. The doctor emerged smiling. A healthy baby girl. Marcus entered the room to see Zara cradling a tiny, pink bundle. "Hope," she whispered. "Her name is Hope." Marcus kissed their daughter's forehead, tears blurring his vision. "She's our miracle child." When they returned home, the mansion seemed to glow brighter. Eleanor insisted on holding her granddaughter every morning, humming lullabies she hadn't sung in decades. "I thought my life was ending," she told Zara, rocking the baby. "But you made it begin again." Zara smiled through happy tears. Hope's arrival became more than just a birth. It was a symbol that every wound could heal and every tragedy could birth joy. That night, as Marcus watched Zara and Hope asleep beside him, he whispered into the quiet room, "I'll never forget where we came from." The family that once lived in despair now lived in grace. Months after Hope's birth, Eleanor called a family meeting in the grand dining hall. "We've been given miracles," she said, standing tall with her cane. "Now we must give others the same chance." She announced her dream to establish the Hope Washington Foundation, a global charity supporting families dealing with paralysis and disability. Zara immediately volunteered to help manage operations, using her therapy experience to design real rehabilitation programs. Marcus funded the project personally, saying, "Let this be our legacy, not money but healing." They converted part of the old Washington estate into a rehabilitation center. The day it opened, hundreds gathered, families in wheelchairs, doctors, and the press. Eleanor cut the ribbon herself, her hands trembling with emotion. "2 years ago, I couldn't stand," she said into the microphone. "Today, I walk among heroes, people who refuse to give up." Zara stood beside her, holding Hope in her arms. Cameras flashed as Marcus wrapped his arm around them. That image, the healed woman, the miracle mother, and the hopeful child, made national headlines. But for the Washingtons, it wasn't about fame. It was about faith made visible. As the foundation grew, Zara found herself stretched thin, balancing motherhood, charity, and her marriage. Marcus's business expanded overseas, keeping him away for weeks. Loneliness crept in, whispering doubts. One evening, she sat alone in Hope's nursery, staring at old photos. Eleanor entered quietly. "You're carrying too much again, my dear." Zara smiled weakly. "I thought I could handle everything." Eleanor took her hand. "Strength isn't never falling. It's standing back up with grace." Later that night, Marcus returned unexpectedly from a trip, surprising her with roses. "I've been a fool," he admitted. "Work made me forget what's real." They talked until dawn, mending cracks before they grew. Zara realized love was not a fairy tale. It was daily forgiveness, constant rebuilding. She stood at the balcony afterward, watching the sunrise wash over London. "Every morning," she whispered to herself, "is another chance to walk again." She wasn't speaking only of Eleanor anymore, but of herself, her marriage, and every heart that dared to heal twice. Years passed, and the Washington family became known not for wealth, but for compassion. The Hope Foundation expanded internationally, touching lives in Africa, Asia, and beyond. Zara became its global ambassador, traveling with Marcus and Little Hope to open centers in underprivileged cities. Everywhere they went, people called her the Miracle Maid, though she always laughed and said, "I was just a servant of faith." Eleanor, now fully mobile and radiant in her 70s, often accompanied them, her story inspiring millions. During one of their visits to Ghana, a mother approached Zara, tears streaming. "Your story saved my son. He walks now." Zara hugged her tightly. That night, as she tucked Hope into bed, the little girl asked, "Mummy, what does miracle mean?" Zara smiled. "It means never giving up, no matter what the world says." In that moment, she realized her journey had come full circle. Once she was a maid seeking survival. Now she was a messenger of hope changing the world. Time, kind yet unrelenting, eventually brought its farewell. Eleanor passed peacefully one spring morning, sunlight spilling through her window as Zara held her hand. "You gave me back my legs," she whispered with her final breath. "But more than that, you gave me back my life." Her funeral drew crowds from across the world, patients, families, and those touched by her courage. As the choir sang, Marcus held Zara close, whispering, "She's walking among angels now." In her will, Eleanor left everything, the mansion, her wealth, and the foundation, to Marcus and Zara, trusting them to continue her mission. When Zara visited Eleanor's grave, she placed a single white rose and whispered, "You were my first miracle." The breeze stirred gently, and in her heart, she could almost hear Eleanor's laughter. That day, Zara decided to expand the foundation even further, dedicating a new brand for widows and single mothers in Eleanor's name. Love had turned loss into legacy. 10 years later, the Washington estate was transformed into a center of hope. The walls that once echoed loneliness now rang with laughter and children's footsteps. Hope, now a bright-eyed 10-year-old, ran through the gardens with her friends, shouting, "This is my grandma's house of miracles." Zara watched her from the balcony, tears glistening in her eyes. Marcus joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "We did it," he whispered. "Your miracle became our mission." As the sun set over London, the family gathered in the courtyard. Zara looked at the spot where she had once stood, trembling as a maid with a single suitcase. Everything had changed, but not her heart. She smiled at Marcus and whispered, "It all began when I believed someone could walk again." He kissed her forehead, "And you taught the whole world to believe." The camera of destiny panned out, showing the mansion, the laughter, the light, and a legacy of love that turned pain into purpose. The story of the maid and the mother who walked again became a legend of faith, a reminder that the greatest miracles often begin with a single act of compassion. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.